I met Rama at another event, and she told me about this organization and invited me here. So very happy to be here among you guys. A little bit about myself. I'm a almost 25-year veteran of the police department. I started back in 1998, 1999. I'm a immigrant from India. So I'm living the American dream, if you will, and been a police officer at University of Maryland when I first started, and now work with the Park Police in Montgomery County. So that's just a little bit about me. I'm married. I have 3 children. My oldest is as a boy. He's at University of Maryland studying journalism, and I have 2 daughters. They're both in high school. So I'll tell you a little bit about Park Police. Park Police has 4 branches. It has the support branch, which incorporates our fleet, building, equipment, evidence, budget, and our dispatchers. Those are all of our civilian positions. Then we have the investigations branch, which I am the assistant chief of. That involves the crime analyst position. We have a decentralized drone unit. I have 6 detectives in our criminal investigations unit. And I have 6 detectives in our, we call it a SAT unit, which is our undercover operations. We also have the operations branch, which includes our motors unit, our mounted unit, which is our horses. We have a canine unit, and we have a marine unit in that branch. And then the final branch is our patrol branch. That's generally called the backbone of any agency. We have about 96 sworn officers, and we have 26 civilian positions. A little bit more about the park system. We're located in Montgomery County, Maryland. It borders the District of Columbia. The park system has about 37,000 acres of parkland, which includes 421 parks, 490 miles of streams, several parkways, buildings, the whole gamut. And so that's what our officers patrol. We have about 14 million visitors to our park systems every year. So that is a large responsibility that we have to keep our parks safe, our community safe, and our visitors safe. All right, so getting to crime analysis. So how does data and analytics impact policing? So we call it crime analysis. Some people might refer to it as predictive policing or evidence-based policing. And some people think crime analysis is new to policing. But actually in 1911, a gentleman by the name of August Balmer, he was the chief of Berkeley Police in California. He's quoted with saying, on the assumption of the regularity of crime and similar occurrences, it's possible to tabulate these occurrences by areas within a city and thus determine the points which have the greatest danger of such crimes and at what points have the least danger. That's a pretty complicated way of saying it, but it generally means that we understand crime happens. Crime happens every day, and it happens with some regularity. So if we understand that crime happens with some regularity, if we can study it, we can tabulate it, we can understand where it's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and sometimes who's going to commit these crimes. So with that information, we're able to deploy resources, deploy personnel, and just improve policing in general, improve community safety in general. So basically, policing, 15 to 20 years ago, even before that, I'll just take you through, how policing was generally done. Police officers report for duty. They would go out on the road either by car, foot, bike, or whichever method. They respond to calls for service. Somebody calls the police, calls 911, reports a crime, the officers arrive, they write the report, and back then the reports were carbon copies. So copies of the reports would go to a record keeper, and then another copy would go into a large binder that would stay in the patrol room, or we call it a breakout room or roll call room. Now, it was the responsibility of the sergeant at that time to go through the reports. Now, you got to imagine that the binder is going to be 6 inches thick, and the sergeant is not going to go through all the reports. He might go through the last week's reports. So the sergeant would bring all his officers in for roll call at the beginning of the shift, and he would have reviewed the 15, 20 reports that are in there, and then explain to the troops, explain to his officers, hey, this week we had, X amount of robberies at this gas station. We had a bank robbery here. We've had rapes in the park here. And so that was the information the officers took, and they went out into the street and tried to protect the public with that information, knowing, hey, if we had 2 rapes in the park last week, we're going to go to this park and we're going to patrol. So that's generally how policing worked. And even so, you're jumping forward to modern day policing. So these analytics that we were talking about, even back then, it did occur for high profile crimes. So if you had a serial rapist, if you had a serial murderer, or something, major that occurred in the community, they would do analytics for it. But analytics generally wasn't done for day-to-day policing. So modern day policing utilizes data, collects data, and uses it for day-to-day operations. So that's essentially what crime analysis does today in modern day policing. So when we think about data, the police collect a huge, vast amount of data. And that data collection begins as soon as a 911 call is made. So we have, our dispatchers answer the 911 call, and they enter the information of the caller into what's called a computer-aided dispatch system. We refer to as CAD. So as soon as the call comes in, the call comes in through a computer. So that computer is automatically collecting that data, that call, the time period, all that information. Then the call taker, the dispatcher, will input more information from the caller. All that information is then transferred to another system called a records management system, or we call it RMS. So that's one part of it. So once the call comes in, the dispatcher will dispatch the officer out to the call. The officers arrive on the scene, take the report. I'm going through this very quickly. We'll take the report. That report that they take will have an abundance of information as well. Now we collect it digitally. So when that information is taken, that report is fed into the RMS system, or the records management system. So it combines information from the CAD that the dispatchers took, takes information that the officers took, and puts it together. And that's a lot of data. So that's where the crime analyst position comes in. So the crime analyst is then tasked with taking that plethora of data and building queries or running queries on it. And depending on the strength and the capabilities of our RMS system and the analyst ability, it produces reports, right? And when I say produces reports, data can be used to produce all kinds of reports, but you're going to have to create useful reports that are useful for management, for the officers, and just like anything else, garbage in, garbage out. So the data output, or the analysis that we do, is really dependent upon the information that's put into the system. So the quality of the analysis is really dependent on the quality of the report that's being written by the officer. So everybody plays a part in data analytics. So what can you do with that data now that you've gotten it? And at the end of my talk here, I'll show you, the final product of what we've done. So data analytics, can tell you the rate of crime, the changes in the rate of crime. It can tell you when, where, how crime occurred. And it'll tell you, it's predictive policing. It'll tell you almost like a weather forecast, when can you expect the crime to occur? So a little bit of our agency and how we use crime analysis. I took over the investigative branch about year and a half ago. So when I came in, we have a crime analyst that does the job. She was an administrative aide that was chosen to fill the vacancy. She doesn't have any specific training in analysis or crime analysis, but she was available and she took the job, and she does a great job with it. But when I came in, we would have weekly reports of what crime occurred in the previous weeks. Just like, I told you, in the olden days, they had a large binder and it had weekly reports. It's essentially that, but now it's digital. It was helpful, but we really weren't making any big impacts with that information. That information wasn't as useful as it could be. So what I tasked her to do, what we did together, is we took 3 years of crime data for our agency, and we analyzed it. So the biggest issues for park police, we live in a very blessed to live in a very low crime area, but one of our biggest issues is theft from autos. We're plagued by that, because most people come to the parks to enjoy the outdoors. They leave all their valuables in the car. And there's people who understand that and they prey on it, the criminal element, they prey on it. So that's one of the issues that we dealt with, and we were dealing with it on a weekly basis. So that was the impetus for me to say, hey, we need to do something about this. We need to find out, when it's happening, who's committing these crimes, and how we can stop it. So that's what started, if you want to call it a journey, for me to take the data we have and then analyze it. So when we did analyze it, we did, discover a number of things that were useful. A lot of times, we think it's common sense, hey, crime's going to happen on Saturdays, or crime's going to happen in the evenings or after hours. And sometimes it's true, but what data analytics tells you, it confirms, your theories, or, what you suspect. And sometimes it tells you something new. So those are the kind of things that we're really interested in data analytics to find, to confirm what we believe or to tell us something new. So for us, for the theft from autos, what did we do with the data? When we did the analytics for 3 years, we've collected a great deal of data, and we were able to put a real, we didn't stop theft from autos altogether, but we put a real dent in the rate of its occurrence. What we discovered with the data analytics was we discovered when it was likely to happen, and we were able to narrow it down to 4 hours and 1 day of the week where it was most likely to happen. So what that allowed me to do is I went and talked to my patrol commanders. I went and talked to our special operations center, and I said, hey, this is the time that this is likely to occur. I talked to my chief. We got overtime authorized for extra officers to patrol those locations at those times, those dates, to create a visible presence. And that really, and then we also had undercover officers. It was a joint effort. We had undercover officers working in some of those areas, and that really did put a real strong dent in the crime. Now, there's a lot of factors that affect crime, so I can't take 100% of the credit for that. A lot more analysis would need to be done to make that determination. But for now, I'll take the credit for that. And so we apply that. I talk about theft from autos, but we apply that to other crimes that we deal with, sexual assaults and other. In a number of other crimes, we can apply the same analysis to. So, saying all that, there's 3 types of crime analysis that we conduct. It's one is called the tactical analysis, and that's basically what I just talked to you about. We detect patterns and try to detect trends, and it provides information for immediate action for us to deploy our resources, etc. The second type of analysis is strategic analysis. That looks deeper at long-term problems, things that are chronic to us, not just to attack it at that time, but to identify the root cause, to really solve the problem, not just a lot of people say put a Band-Aid on it. and an example of that would be if we have, say we have after, youth after school hanging out in certain locations using drugs or doing whatever. We try to find out why, and we can send an officer there every time. Right? We can send an officer every time and disperse the students, but then we have to determine why are those youth or young people congregating there. Is it an environmental issue? Is it a social issue? And we can address it in a myriad of ways. So that's strategic analysis. The last type of crime analysis that we do is administrative analysis. And that takes into account, that's the analysis of all the calls we get. And we use that information to analyze the officer's workload. The information we gather from that, we can put into our annual reports. And just helps management decide how best to guide the police department into the future as far as the number of officers to hire. Maybe we're having too many officers in one area of the county, and it's not where officers are not needed, and we can shift those officers elsewhere. So in a nutshell, that's basically how crime analysis, I know I said a lot, and I'll take questions at the end, but that in a nutshell is how crime analysis works for the police department. I have a slideshow to share. It's basically a presentation that our crime analysis made for one of our meetings. This is one of the earliest, well, this is for this fall of 2021, but this is one of the earlier ones that we worked on together. Create a forecast for the season. So the way we did it, we know for our park system, the season's weather impacts crime. A lot of people don't think about that, but it does impact crime. So we broke up the year into seasons, obviously, and we have a winter forecast, a summer forecast, a fall forecast, and a spring forecast, and that kind of narrows down, filters down the crimes that the officers might expect or should expect, and helps us to deploy our resources. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I'll just walk you through each slide here. Give me 1 second. All right, I hope everybody can see my screen. Is that true?
Yeah, it looks good.
Chris, okay, very good. All right, so this is basically the our cover page for it. I work for the Maryland National Capital Park Police, and there's 2 divisions. I should have mentioned that earlier. I work for the Montgomery County Division. There's a Prince George's County Division. It's I said earlier, our division is about 96 officers. The Prince George's County Division is about 120 officers. And so we work together on many different calls and issues, etc. So this right here is the fall forecast. It covers the months of September, October, and November. And the data is taken from 3 years. We utilize 2018, 2019, and 2020. Certainly, the more data that you input, the better results that you're going to get. So this is a look at some of our stats from 2018 to 2020, and this is how it breaks it down. So it's useful. It says 88% of the robberies were closed by arrest. That's useful for our detectives. That's useful for management. And of all the assaults that we had, 75% were second-degree assaults. This is very important for our officers, that 37% of DUIs occurred in the fall months. So there's a larger percent of DUIs occurring. So that tells us that, we might need to deploy our officers differently for the fall months to cover more roadways, et cetera. Another issue that we have is vandalism. We're sometimes plagued with vandalism. I say plagued, but we don't have a whole lot when you compare with large cities like Philadelphia or Chicago or things like that. Here's just 8 vandalisms. 8 vandalisms is, it's a lot for us, but it's not a lot for many cities. I understand that. So we have Olney Manor, Woodside Park, Slide Creek Parkway, it's a stream valley. We do have a lot of gang activity, so we really do keep an eye on graffiti to ensure that, just to monitor, where gang activity takes place, if the graffiti is indeed affiliated with gang activity. Another issue that we have is sex offenses. And, most of you guys probably know that a lot of sex offenses do occur in the park systems, and sex offenses can range anywhere from indecent exposure. We have, a lot of Johns who sometimes come to the park and masturbate. Then we have individuals that commit other sex offenses, as in touching people, etc. So this information, it tells you, and once again, this is just for the fall months, that we had 11 sex offenses committed.
Oh, okay.
And it shows that 55% were indecent exposures, 91% were committed by a stranger. These are things that, you might not think about, or the officers might not think about. And another thing that was interesting for us was the days of the week. The offenses are committed on all the days of the week except Saturday. So unique information sometimes pops out, and it helps us really to deploy our officers. We do have a lot of littering and dumping. A lot of times people find it easier to come to the park and dump their trash rather than take it to a recycling center, etc. And this is what I was talking about. Our thefts, we're plagued by thefts from auto. This graph, basically, the first is TFA, which is theft from auto. Then we have other. We do have bicycles that are stolen, and we do have a lot of swim centers where, people come in, lock their items in the locker, and we have the criminal element that comes in and breaks into the locker and steals items, etc. But as you can tell, it fluctuates between the years 2018, 2019, and 2020. And certainly COVID and the shutdown of pretty much society as a response to the COVID pandemic did impact our crime numbers as well. This is just some more information on thefts from motor vehicles. So what this can tell you, even for the community, if you look at the method and damage to the vehicle, 74% of thefts from auto were from broken windows. 14, there's no damage or is unknown, and 12% of the vehicles were unsecure. So what does this tell us? This broken window, 74%. So essentially what that tells us is that most of the vehicles that were broken into, items of value were in plain sight. Criminals usually will not try to break into a vehicle or bust a window if they don't know if something's in there. I mean, if the car's clean, they're not going to break a window. But if they see, a purse, a bag, a laptop, a cell phone, then it becomes worth it for them to break into the vehicle. And just a public safety announcement for everybody that's listening. If you are going to the park or going anywhere, mall, shopping center, a lot of times people take their bags once they reach the destination, shove it under their seat, or take it out, put it in the trunk of the vehicle. I would advise you not to do that. I would advise you that, before you arrive at a location, if you have valuables in your car, pull over to a gas station, pull over somewhere else and put the items away. Because typically what happens is a lot of these locations, the criminal element is there, shopping malls, parks, and they're watching. So as soon as you pull in the car, they'll see you, put your items, down underneath your seat, or they'll see you take especially during Christmas holidays, a lot of people buy stuff and put it into their trunk. They'll see you put it into your trunk, and they will break into your car and access the trunk. So public safety announcement, if you're, especially as you're Christmas shopping and doing other things, make sure you don't put stuff where it's visible, and make sure you hide it prior to wherever you're, wherever you're going to your destination. All right. So those are some of the things that we can gather from some of these reports. So this was very important to us. Thefts from motor vehicles, it shows that most of it occurred on Saturday and Sunday, and most of it occurred between noon, and 4 o'clock. And that makes complete sense, right? That's something that we could almost anticipate. And why is that? Because most people come to the parks on Saturdays and Sundays, right? That's when our park usage goes up. The criminal element knows that, and that's when they show up as well. And the hours is important too, between noon and 4. I'm not sure exactly why that occurs, but most people are in the parks during the daytime. Parks are closed at night. And probably the most use the park sees is probably between those hours, 12 noon and 4 o'clock. We use military time. So if you see 1600 and 2000, that 1600 is correlated with 4 p.m. and 2000 or 2000 is correlated with 8 p.m. We don't say 2000, we say 2000, but I don't know how many of you guys understand military time. All right. And this is once again just a summary of the thefts from motor vehicles. So all this information, all the slides I showed you, we can't give that information to the officers on the street. That's a lot to read, a lot to go through. So what we do is we put all that information. I've tasked my crime analysis take all that information and put it all together into one page where all that information is there, what's necessary essentially. So this page is what's sent out to each officer, sent out to the commanders.
Okay, that's.
I'm sorry. So I'll go through the trash reports, sex offense crimes, theft from auto crimes, vandalism crimes, graffiti hotspots. It tells you where most of the crime is going to occur. So in addition to crime analytics, I didn't show you, but we also have crime mapping, where they put pins into a map, and that kind of shows where where the hotspots are for crimes, where you'll have a large number of pins. So we use mapping as well in crime analytics. So that is the last slide. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here, and I will turn it over back to Chris and answer any questions that you may have. I know I said a lot, gave you a lot of information. I don't know if it was as much as you wanted or not enough, but hopefully that you guys all took away something from it.
Yeah, so we do have one question in the chat.
Okay.
We wanted to know how much information, how much of this information are you allowed to make available to the public? And is the public able to use that to avoid bad areas and better protect themselves? And as a follow-up, are you aware of the website crimegrade.org, and how up to date is it, if you have any information about that?
Okay. Yeah, if I can ask you one thing, if you just stop the recording for the question and answer session, that would be great. To